So welcome, everyone. This is a great crowd. Thank you for coming. And thank you so much for joining us for this great celebration of marriage equality victories in Maryland, Maine, Minnesota, and Washington. It's nice to win. Our luncheon this year is dedicated to change, to the hard work it takes to make it, and the even harder work to keep it. Twice this year, we have stood on the steps of the Supreme Court, joined by thousands of people calling for justice. The first time was to preserve one of the cornerstones of the long struggle for civil rights, the Voting Rights Act. The second time, to urge the court to strike down the barriers to marriage equality in Proposition 8 and the Defense of Marriage Act. We brought a message of hope that the court will respect the great American journey toward a better, more just society, that it will take us forward, not backward, that it will not stand in the way of the great changes that are transforming American society. And make no mistake, change is here. Back when DOMA was passed in 1996, there were no states that allowed same-sex couples to marry. Today, there are 12, plus the District of Columbia, and more certainly on the way, including California if the Supreme Court does the right thing in a few weeks. When California is added to the list, over 95 million Americans will live in states that value freedom and marriage equality. That's amazing. The four groups that we honored today are living proof of the enormous value that comes from diverse organizations working together. And that's exactly how Alliance for Justice works, day in and day out. When nonprofit groups around the country wanted to know how to navigate the IRS rules for lobbying and ballot initiatives, AFJ's Boulder initiative was there, making sure that all of us have a voice in these perilous times. And by the way, if only IRS agents had taken some of our trainings, they would have saved themselves a lot of grief. When the obstruction of President Obama's nominees reached unbelievable heights, we, along with our 100+ members, called for reform of the Senate's filibuster rules, which continue to hobble our courts and our democracy. And working with many of you in this room, AFJ continues to help lead the effort to prioritize judgeships in this president's second term. I'll admit it, though, our opponents are right about one thing. The D.C. Circuit matters. We still haven't filled John Roberts' seat, which he left in 2005. This is a court that blocks Wall Street reforms, undermines labor rights, and rolls back environmental protections. Balance must be restored, and empty seats on this court need to be filled, and filled now. And while we're at it, all the seats on the National Labor Relations Board should be filled. Tom Perez should be confirmed to be Labor Secretary. Gina McCarthy should be voted in as EPA Administrator. And Richard Cordray should get the vote he's been denied for over 2 years to be Director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. So the stakes are high this year in Congress, But the same is true across the street at the Supreme Court, where the nation's commitment to justice is being put to the test. When the Voting Rights Act was argued a couple of months ago, Justice Scalia shocked the courtroom when he described the law as racial entitlement. He even questioned the legitimacy of the act because Congress passed it by overwhelming margins when it was reauthorized in 2006. Now, it's a disturbing thing for a Supreme Court justice to imply that laws are not legitimate if they're politically popular. But it's even more disturbing to hear such hostile views come out from the mouth of a Supreme Court justice. Nevertheless, we remain hopeful. In a few weeks, the Supreme Court will come down on the right side of history on the Voting Rights Act and same-sex marriage. But if the court rejects core constitutional values, we are prepared to continue the fight just as long as it takes to get justice. It's, as many of you know, become a tradition at this luncheon, not only to honor those who are living, but those champions of justice who died over the past year. And this was a year in which we lost many champions. One was Jim Nabrett, about whom a civil rights advocate said, quote, "If there were such a thing as civil rights royalty, Jim would be a prince." Anthony Lewis, who was a towering figure in journalism for over half a century, whose voice will be sorely missed. Bob Edgar, whose inspired leadership of Common Cause was only the latest contribution to the cause of social justice during a lifetime of public service. And Rosalind Kaiser, who was much beloved by those who knew her and a valued member of this community. All of them showed us that there are many ways to make change and make a difference. But for those of you who have joined us today, this is our promise to you. We will fight for a judiciary that is of the people, by the people, for the people. We will urge the Senate to end the abuse of the filibuster. We will challenge the Supreme Court to preserve equal justice for all Americans while opposing efforts to limit access to the courts. Throughout the ensuing debate over the IRS, we will encourage progressive groups to be as feisty as ever. Working with all of you, we will fight back against those who seek to limit reproductive freedoms, voting rights, and worker protections. And finally, we will continue to press the administration to close Guantanamo and end an ugly chapter in human rights. Your presence here is further testament to the spirit of unity and progress that our movement embodies, and an expression of faith in the cause of justice. We're thankful that you're all here and very thankful for your support. Thank you very much.